Cameo King of the Good Girl podcast. I'm going to hop right into this week with a confession. So here's what you need to know first about the Good Girl podcast. It is a podcast of women's confessions about our faith, flaws, femininity, and culture. Here on the Good Girl podcast, we destigmatize the messy process of figuring out life. I hold space for women. I allow women the space to simply figure it out, where we talk about our ups, our downs, our lefts, our rights, our fronts, our backs, and allowing women, including myself, to be fully and wholly myself in every area of my life. And I call those confessions. So let's get right to it. My mom was about 16, 17 years old, living in the city of Detroit during the '67 uprising. And I had a conversation with her actually this morning about what it was like then and if there was any insight to what's happening now. The part of our conversation that I want to highlight is two things that she shared. First, which I thought was hilarious, she was like, y'all generation, y'all different. Y'all different. She was like, we were not that bold. She said, y'all took over a whole precinct. Wow. Those are her words, not mine. And there's this other piece of the conversation I'm going to share. It's sort of a longer clip, but it's my mom comparing the similarities of the '67 uprising in Detroit to what's happening now nationally. Listen up.
Well, when this first pandemic started, I really did equate it to the '67 riot. As you recall, I said on a feed from in our conversations that the quietness, the eeriness of it felt just like the '67 riot. That, you guys better be careful about where you go and what you do, because back in the '67 riot, to keep the inner city calm, what they did was to restrict the water lines, and they knew where all the grid was as far as where the majority of black people stay. Like, we weren't scattered out like we are now, when everybody's at home. And we had curfew. When they first started this, they instituted the curfew for the coronavirus to try and, they said, to make sure everybody was in the house and off the street, trying to contain the virus. But they said that back in '67, trying to contain the black people in their homes, if you were caught out, you were taken to jail. They had the troops. I can remember the tanks rolling down Tireman, going toward, because it was mostly like on 14th, 15th, in the inner city. From them showing that clip of that white man just sitting on that dude's neck, that enraged people. When that mother got on TV and when they said he was calling for his mama, that had been dead, I think, 5 years, that just hit home. And she said, that could have been your son, my son, anybody. He was calling on all mothers. And when she did that, it set it off. It set it off.
And I want to be clear on who my mama is. If y'all don't know, she's been on a podcast a couple times, but my mom is very much a no nonsense type mom, straight no chaser. And I don't fall too far from the tree. I think I've been a little bit more diplomatic, and I've had to pull it back, curtail it a little bit, because it's just different. Try talking to a 60 plus, 70 plus black woman. Try it, y'all. So a little bit different. But in addition to that, I also wanted to share a few things that will give us some perspective on what's happening. And in addition to what my mom shared, And these are some things that I somewhat saw and I observed on the internet. So one, that riots are not the causes of white resistance. They are the consequences to it. That is none other than Dr. King. And so what we're seeing, it's not a riot. It's an uprising. It's a revolution. It's an insurrection. These are some things also I put from Keisha Johnson's, her Facebook page. And a part of what she shared, she said, this is an emotional response to mounting frustrations of racism, police brutality, regression of civil rights, etc. And saying that the things that are happening are riots, I believe that language really discounts the weight of what's happening. So I'm encouraging us to be extremely intentional about our language, because our language is powerful, and be even more intentional about what's playing out and why it's playing out, and also how we're consuming it and internalizing it. So this rolls directly into this week's confession, and it's actually my confession. So almost 6 years ago, an unarmed 18-year-old Michael Brown Jr. was shot and killed in Ferguson, Missouri. This after the now resigned cop, Darren Wilson, drove by in his cruiser and told him to move to the sidewalk. Mr. Brown and Officer Wilson began to argue, and within moments there was a scuffle. The officer shot and killed Michael Brown. Again, Brown was unarmed. A few months later, in that same year, a grand jury decided not to indict Officer Wilson. And on that dark day in November, when the decision came down to not indict Wilson, I was sitting on my couch. I remember it like it was yesterday. And my heart sank through my chest, into the pit of my stomach, and into the floor. And I cried. I cried because I felt hopeless. I cried because it was painful. I cried because I felt powerless. I felt like the righteous had lost. I felt like Goliath had won. I felt like justice was a fallacy that I believe, and it stung. It stung because I knew I actually had faith in our country, or in the powers that be, whatever that means. And I believe in the lie of fairness, that somehow fairness would manifest in our lifetime. But instead, any faith I had in balance and things working out in that moment, only in that moment, came crumbling down to the reality that many of my loved ones were at the mercy of a failed moral compass of sin-laden powers that be. So there I was, sitting on my couch, crying, thinking about my brother, my cousins, my uncles, my dad, my grandfather, all that sit at this very vulnerable intersection that no one can control, of fear and pride of lousy white supremacists who cloak their strength in the myth of guns and a badge. And that was 6 years ago. And so much has happened since then, right? So the Black lives of girls, women, boys, men, and non-gender conforming individuals. So much has happened in their lives. So much so that muscle of emotion that I experienced that day sitting on the edge of my couch 6 years ago, it simply isn't a part of me anymore. I don't know where it went. I don't know what happened. But it's not there. And I wouldn't call it numb. I wouldn't call it tired. I wouldn't call it pissed or fed up. I would probably call it non-existent. And the reason I say non-existent versus numbness is because when I've been numb, I felt some type of sensation, whether it was a disbelief or just knowing at any minute I could erupt, almost like the calm before the storm. But now, when I hear about these stories, I feel a certain type of way, but overall, non-existent. But let me get back to the point. So what I really believe this is because I'm not new to the social justice and equity work. I got introduced to this work through a nonprofit, One Love Global, about 12 years ago. And through that nonprofit, we worked on systems change, multi-sector alignment, community organizing, practical steps for people, lasting practical steps for people of color. I'm talking working with mayor's offices across the state of Michigan, churches, lawmakers, developing policy. So we were in the thick of it. I was in the thick of it on all levels. And I think because I have become familiar with the rhetoric of change agents, the hurdles, the ambitions, and what it really takes, I've come to understand what systemic change looks like. And getting to that place of change that we know is needed, it doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen with high emotion. So I don't know what I'm feeling right now. I don't know if it's just like, well, Camille, you just dig in deeper and do the work. So I think that's why I'm here. I think this is why I am absent of emotion, because I've cried, I've been angry, I've heard the stories, and it seems like we only move forward by inches. So my truth is I am past exhaustion, and I'm tired of hearing I'm tired. And the reason why is because that does nothing, at least for me. And many of us, we are doing our part in our corner of the world, right? We're in the trenches doing what we can. And there are others of us that are trying to figure out what to do. And then there's another group of us that are trying to figure out if what we are doing is even effective. So today, I submit to you for your consideration 3 things that will help you in this moment and moments beyond. Now, this is for individuals, not the collective. So meaning apply this to yourself. This ain't about applying this to a group of people. You got to do the work internally yourself. Apply it to yourself, right? And I'm practicing this with you, so you are along this journey with me, right? So 3 things. Number 1, do what is best for your soul. Your soul is what anchors you here on earth. It is intrinsic to who you are. It is what makes you you, and you need you first. Second, your present is a blessing to you and your loved ones. And third, you have a purpose to fulfill. So protect you and do what's best for your soul. Now, understand this. What's best for you will look completely different than what's best for me or what's best for the next person. For me, doing what's best for my soul could be completely disengaging in any type of conversation around Black Lives Mattering, right? For someone else, it could be checking their white friends. For someone else, it could be lamenting over the loss of life. For others, it could be silence. Another, it could be protesting and pontificating. Another, it could be building their business so that they support other Black businesses. Another, it could simply be raising their families to ensure they are alive. And another, it could be simply going to work every day so that your family isn't eventually dependent upon the system of capitalism. And another could just be like, F the system. You know, all of these are crucial in the collective picture. But at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for your soul. Don't consider anybody else. Do what is best for you. And you will have naysayers. I may have been one of them naysayers on somebody's post that I shouldn't have been talking on. I'm talking to myself because I didn't take my advice, and y'all gonna hear my advice to number 3. But do what's best for your soul. Only you know what's best for your soul, and don't let anyone tell you different. All right. Number 2, we're going to get to number 3 I just mentioned, but number 2, for those of us who feel called to the work of systemic change, I implore you to start local, hyper local, like your neighborhood, your local school, or your city council. Start local. Be the solution to a problem or be a part of a larger collective body in your local area. There are local Black Lives Matter chapters. There are local NAACP chapters, ACLU chapters. And mind you, kind of what I said before, this work isn't going to look the same for everyone. Someone's local work could be creating a safe space in the form of a daycare for Black children. Another could be being a coach on a local sports team. Another could be building a business to fund the next new initiative. Another could be so many other different things. The point is, all this work could look different, but it has to begin local. And I want to balance this. I want to bring this balance to this. I do find it extremely problematic that those who did not cause the problem or build the inequitable racist system are being called to fix it. I got an issue with that. We didn't wake up and say, I want racist white people to hate us. We didn't do that. I don't understand why white people hate us in the first place. But anyway, I say all this to say that everyone can fight the same enemy, but with a different tactic. And number 3, which is last and what I think is the most important during this time and that will carry you into the future and what has brought me peace and what I still need to work on doing. And I hope I continue to follow this mantra. And it is, do not address shade from trees with no fruit. I'm going to say it again. Do not address shade from trees with no fruit. There is a lot of talk, a lot of dialogue, a lot of expectations about what the next person should and shouldn't be doing with their business, their time, their money, their social media in response to the injustice. But what I've learned is to hush my mouth. Me, not nobody else. Cameo, meaning pull them fingers back from the keyboard. Hush my mouth when I do not know the other person's fruit, meaning I don't know what you've done in this area that you're attempting to address. I ain't expending my energy on a person's opinions when that same person has done absolutely no work in the field in which they are attempting to address. I'm going to read this quote from Theodore Roosevelt that sums up what I'm saying, right? It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how strong the man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. So we got to watch who we engage with, y'all, because we are using our energy with those timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat, because they have never been in the fight. They have never put their hands to the plow to work in this area. So be careful. So please use your energy wisely. And I'm talking to myself. Please use your energy wisely, first to your calling, and then, if you choose, only to those who are in the ring, who are fighting, who are working, and who are cultivating their fruit. So I hope this podcast has added peace, healing, or simply given you some tools to bring about a better you. As always, if you have a confession, feel free to DM us or send me an email, cameo@goodgirlradio.com. And if you haven't already, leave a comment on our podcast on whatever platform you're on and tell us how you feel. I hope this conversation was healing to you, and I hope you continue to believe in the good. This is Cameo King, and thank you for listening to the Good Girl Podcast.